Episode 5, The Apple. At this stage Charliza was ready to make a contribution. According to her observation, from the things I had presented thus far, it seemed that I was made to appear as inconspicuous as is possible. I concurred and resolved to delve in this self-same direction. I recommenced my pacing of the room and with this thought in mind, resumed my questioning of why, and what is so special about me. Immediately I zoomed in on an incident which happened to me when I was but 6 years old and in my first year in primary school. I attended the Muslim Benevolent School, an institution established and founded by the private sector to cater for the needs of Muslim children. It had classes from sub-A up to Standard 3 and taught the same subjects given at the state secular schools with the exception that religious instruction are given every morning. The school also admitted Christian children who received religious instructions according to the tenet of their faith. When I attended primary school in the early 1950s, us children were still fed by school feeding schemes, a thing unheard of in this modern world of today. During the morning break we got soup or sandwiches and in the afternoons it was fruit. I was in sub-A, it was near the afternoon break, we children were excited, we were going to be fed with apples for the first time this year and it had just arrived. I am not talking about these small green sour apples, no. It was those big, yellow, green luscious ones, for we had caught a glimpse of it. Our teacher, Miss Adams, Juffro Adams, we called her because it was an Afrikaans medium school, had a cardboard box in her arms, with the apples stacked to the brim. In those days the classes were not jam-packed. Nor did we have shifts as is the case nowadays. We were seated in long benches, 4 to a bench which was arranged and spaced to form 2 rows, with a center aisle, an aisle running along both side walls and an aisle at the back. Juffro Adams would come walking down the aisles and slap an apple down on the desk in front of everybody. Horrors above horrors, she had forgotten to put an apple in front of me. None of the other children had noticed it and I was too ashamed to bring it to her attention. The next day there was a repeat performance. When she did not put down an apple in front of me, I chose to believe that she thought she did and forgave her, but inwardly I had cringed from embarrassment, and again the other children did not notice anything. I dreaded the coming of the third day, and when she finally came down the aisle with the box of apples in her arms, I was anxious and my heart beat faster. Because somehow I knew there was going to be another repeat performance. My intuition proved correct. For the third time in a row Juffro Adams did not put down an apple in front of me, and for the third time in a row the other children did not notice anything. I was perplexed. This time round I could not take it for granted that Juffro Adams failed to see me, nor was I prepared to say she did it on purpose. I had to be certain, so I whispered into the ear of the boy sitting next to me, whose name was Hussein Faflunker, that I did not get an apple. I do not know if Hussein is still with us, but I am willing to bet he has forgotten this incident a long, long time ago. At first he refused to believe me, saying that I was joking, but my seriousness got through to him and he called out to Miss Adams saying that I did not get an apple. Miss Adams did not, or pretended she did not, hear Hussein. The children sitting near us had heard, and they also called out to her that I did not get an apple. Still Miss Adams did not hear. My face was burning from ear to ear. I wanted the agony to end as quickly as possible and told the children that I do not eat apples and that Miss Adams was aware of this. At first they were incredulous. It was unthinkable that I do not like apples. Sometimes children can be more perceptible than adults. Something must have triggered, for they soon quietened down. I from my side was convinced that Miss Adams had done it on purpose and resolved not to come to school again. That same afternoon I had conveyed my decision to my mother, and by the time evening came around most of the grown ups in the family had come to hear of it, for in those days we were still a close-knit family. My parents did not threaten or force me to go to school, they chose to believe me. I suppose the gravity of the situation made them to approach the problem with circumspection. Maybe they still remembered how I had cried to go to school that time when my sister Rakim, who was a year older than me, attended school for the first time. I had cried so much that my father, bless him, took me to school and begged the principal, Mr. Jassium, to take me in even as a make-believe. He absolutely refused to listen to my father's pleas, and I had to return home with my father, but this time round I accepted the situation and my crying ceased. My father told me not to worry, tomorrow my mother will go with me to school, and if Miss Adams does not apologize then they will take me out of school. It was only after I heard this that I was appeased, and that night for the first time in 3 nights I drifted off into a peaceful sleep. As promised, the next day my mother accompanied me to school. Lo and behold, Miss Adams was not at school, nor did she make an appearance. My mother and I hung around. School had already started, but still no Miss Adams. My mother approached Miss Rudy, the sub-B teacher, and inquired about the whereabouts of Miss Adams. Miss Rudy was surprised that Miss Adams was late for school, saying that it was unusual for her to do so. She advised my mother to wait, giving her the assurance that Miss Adams will turn up because Miss Adams never stays away from school. After an hour had passed and there was still no Miss Adams, Miss Rudy reluctantly admitted that she is not going to make an appearance. My mother decided to lay the problem at Miss Rudy's door and told her everything. Miss Rudy was very sympathetic and promised to look into the matter, saying that Miss Adams was very wrong and had no justification for what she did, I being but a 6-year-old boy and all. She said she will talk to Miss Adams and gave her word that nothing of this sort will ever happen again. Satisfied, my mother left for home and I returned to class. That day Miss Rudy supervised us because Miss Adams never turned up. Instead of apples we were served oranges, and I got my fair share. The next day Miss Adams was back at school. I do not know if Miss Rudy spoke to her because she did not say anything to me. Like the day before, oranges were dished out and I got my due. It seemed like the school had run out of apples because we were just served with oranges. Thereafter, my parents were relieved when I reported that everything was well and the incident was soon forgotten. At the end of that year, when the class reports were dished out, the incident again surfaced briefly. Miss Adams wrote into my school report that I had come 21st in class. There were between 30 to 40 children in the class. I had passed to sub-B, but that I am a very stubborn boy. After my parents had read this report, they jumped onto me, especially my mother. They intimated that the incident with the apple was all my fault. I attempted to defend myself, but it was a feeble effort. I had sensed that in this matter they will be against me irrespective of what I had to say. After all, what justice is there in the world when it comes to choose in a matter between grown-ups, especially school teachers, and little children? Needless to say, this episode was soon forgotten and passed from memory until I had recalled it 40 years later. Now, looking at and examining this incident through the eyes of an adult and with spiritual insight thrown in, I have no hesitation in saying I detect the hand of the Almighty in this affair. I say Miss Adams did not purposefully overlook me, because it is very unlikely for adults to go out of their way to hurt the feelings of small children in such a mean and spiteful way, especially if they did not do anything wrong, and I did not do anything wrong. What is more, she had a soft countenance and chose to teach little children, so obviously she must have had feelings of love towards them. Miss Adams really did not see me, nor did she make herself deaf when Hussein and the Other children called out to her that she did not give me an apple because it was not meant for her to hear, because if she did, this incident would not now be recorded. What about the fact that she did not turn up for school? Did something uncannily happen to prevent her? She definitely was not sick because she had only stayed away for one day. I say, it was not meant for her to have a confrontation with my mother and me. How could she have explained that she did not see me, never mind 3 times in a row, when I was as big as life sitting in front of her? I say that both she and I were innocent in this whole affair, and that Allah on high, the justest of the just, did not want a finger to be pointed to any of us. The fact that she chose to slander me in my school report shows that Miss Rudy had spoken to her, and somehow or another she had to apportion blame on me, thereby absolving herself from this inexplicable deed. What about the fact that the apples had all dried up? I say that Allah Almighty had caused it to be so because I, to save myself from further embarrassment in front of the other children, had told them that I do not eat apples, and Allah did not want me to appear a liar in their eyes, and because in the first place, to begin with, none of this was my fault because I did not plan it nor had any say in the matter. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds, for verily, verily in this matter He had spoken loud and clear. Immediately I shared all this with Charliza, and simultaneously we cried out another sign, and both jumped for joy.